presentation has to do with hockey's importance in Canadian history and how Canada has shaped the game. Hockey is a very big part of Canada's culture, and I will explain these statements through the following topics: Stompin' Tom and the hockey song that you just listened to, the birthplace of hockey, the National Hockey League, Lord Stanley and the Stanley Cup, the hat trick, hockey on radio and television, Hockey Night in Canada, Tim Horton and Tim Hortons, Canadian Tire, the Triple Gold Club, ice hockey rinks, money, and finally, former prime ministers. The hockey song was written and originally performed by Canadian Stompin' Tom Connors in 1973. In 1992, the Ottawa Senators played the hockey song for the first time ever at an NHL arena. The coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs insisted that the song be played in Toronto too. Now the song is an anthem that is played at Canadian arenas and has been heard at American arenas as well. Kingston, Ontario has claimed that hockey was born there. There is an account of a hockey game that took place in 1886 between Royal Military College and Queen's University. This, however, is not true because the hand-carved sticks they used in the first Kingston game had come from the Micmac of Nova Scotia. The birthplace of hockey, or Hurley as it was called around the year 1800, is actually Windsor, Nova Scotia. The picture shown is Long Pond, the place where the actual first game was played. Now I want to talk about the National Hockey League. Before it was the NHL, it was the NHA, National Hockey Association. That was in 1917. The NHL started because of a fight between the owner of the Toronto team, the Toronto Blue Shirts, and the other three NHA franchises. In 1924, the NHL expanded to the USA in the form of the Boston Bruins. In 1926, there were now 10 teams in Ontario, Quebec, the Great Lakes region, and northeastern U.S. In 1933, Foster Hewitt went coast to coast. We'll learn more about him in a bit. The 1930s were the golden age of hockey. During the Great Depression, hockey provided hope. Maple Leaf Gardens opened in the 1931-32 season, and when the Toronto Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup in 1932, they were treated like royalty. Hockey gave Canadians something to cheer about during this tough time in history. By 1942, World War II reduced the NHL to 6 teams, which are more commonly known as the original 6: Boston Bruins, Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Red Wings, Montreal Canadiens, New York Rangers, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. The NHL doubled in size by 1967. The original 6 were the East Division. The new 6 were the West Division. In 1974, the NHL added 6 more teams. In 1979, the World Hockey Association stopped operating and 4 of these teams were added to the NHL. By 1992, there were 22 teams. In the 2004-2005 season, the whole NHL season was canceled because of labor disputes. Today, there are 30 NHL teams, 23 American, and 7 Canadian teams. This chart shows how the game of hockey in the NHL has changed over the years. The red is all the Canadian players. The game has went from all Canadian players to being a mix of different nationalities. The NHL is still over 50% Canadian. Lord Stanley of Preston in 1888 was Governor General of Canada. He went to the Montreal Winter Carnival and got quite excited about the hockey game he saw. He noticed that there was no trophy for the winning team, so he bought a silver bowl. It was 7.5 inches high and 11.5 inches across. It costed about $50. This trophy was first called the Dominion Hockey Challenge Cup and was later named the Stanley Cup. One rule about the cup is you can't hoist it above your head until you've won the cup. The first winner of the Stanley Cup was the Montreal Amateur Athletic Association Hockey Club. They were the champions of the Amateur Hockey Association of Canada for 1893. The team that has won the most Stanley Cups is the Montreal Canadiens. They have won it 24 times. One thing I should mention is that Lord Stanley never witnessed a championship game, and he never attended a presentation for his trophy. Pretty surprising to me. A side note, I am not a fan of the Montreal Canadiens. Something that Canada has brought to the game of hockey is the hat trick. A hat trick is when a player scores 3 goals in a single game. When the player does this, fans throw their hats out on the ice to honor the player. This all started in the 1940s when a Toronto haberdasher used to give free hats to Toronto Maple Leafs players when they scored 3 goals in a game. Now I know Mr. Scott likes new words, so let me explain what a haberdasher is. A dealer in men's clothing. Bill Mosienko, a Ukrainian Canadian, has the fastest hat trick in NHL history. In 1952, playing for the Chicago Blackhawks, he scored 3 goals against the New York Rangers in only 21 seconds. Canada also gave the hockey world the Gordie Howe hat trick. Instead of this hat trick being 3 goals, it is a goal, an assist, and getting into a fight all in the same game. Speaking of Gordie Howe, he is considered one of the greatest hockey players of all time, and his nickname Mr. Hockey. His wife's nickname is Mrs. Hockey, and both of these names are registered trademarks. The next 4 slides show how the Canadian NHL teams' logos and jerseys have changed over the years. Some of them are not the most recent, but you will get the idea. The Calgary Flames originally were the Atlanta Flames. The bottom picture shows the Edmonton Oilers. On this slide, we see the Vancouver Canucks jerseys at the top, and at the bottom we have, in my opinion, the best team in the league, the Ottawa Senators. Here is how the Toronto Maple Leafs have changed. Originally, they were the Toronto St. Patricks. Below, we see the Montreal Canadiens logos. I repeat, I am not a fan of the Montreal Canadiens. This slide, you may be wondering why I included the Phoenix Coyotes and the Colorado Avalanche. Let me explain. In 1996, the Winnipeg Jets were moved to Phoenix, and they became the Phoenix Coyotes. In the meantime, Atlanta, having already failed once with the Atlanta Flames, decided to start a new franchise, the Atlanta Thrashers. In the 2011-2012 season, Winnipeg took over the Thrashers and the Winnipeg Jets have returned. The tickets for the Winnipeg home opener on October 9th, 2011 were an average cost of $713. This goes to show you that the real money is north of the border when it comes to hockey sales. Another side note, the Phoenix Coyotes are now known as the Arizona Coyotes. In 1995, the Quebec Nordiques moved to Denver, Colorado. They became the Colorado Avalanche. This same season, Colorado's first season as the Avalanche, won the Stanley Cup. This makes it look like a conspiracy and that the NHL didn't want a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup, but that's just my opinion. The very first NHL radio broadcast took place on February 14th, 1923. It was only the third period of a game between the Toronto St. Patricks and the Ottawa Senators. The very first hockey game televised in Canada was on October 11th, 1952. It was a game between the Montreal Canadiens and the Detroit Red Wings. This televised hockey game happened only a few weeks after television has arrived in Canada. Foster Hewitt was a Canadian radio broadcaster, and his nickname is the Voice of Hockey. He is famous for his play-by-play calls for Hockey Night in Canada, a title that he came up with. He is also famous for the much-used phrase, "He shoots, he scores." Ron MacLean has worked on Hockey Night in Canada since 1986 as the host. He also hosts Coach's Corner with Don Cherry, a true Canadian nationalist. Ron MacLean was replaced by George Stroumboulopoulos as the main host of Hockey Night in Canada in October of 2014. Ron is still Don Cherry's sidekick for Coach's Corner and is now the host of Hometown Hockey. Since the year 2000, CBC has aired an annual Special Hockey Day in Canada. Every Canadian NHL team plays, and games from smaller communities are aired too. Hockey Day in Canada takes place this year on Saturday, February 6th. Years ago, men would sit around on benches in the local general store and chat about, well, whatever old guys chat about. Now there's a new general store setting, Tim Hortons. This coffee shop is Canada's largest food service operator. It even beats McDonald's. And to think that it all started with hockey. This business was founded by Miles Gilbert, mostly known as Tim Horton. Tim played in the NHL from 1949 until 1974 when he died in a car crash. Tim opened his first Tim Horton donut shop in Hamilton, Ontario. The picture in the bottom right-hand corner is the original Tim Hortons location. There is a statue of Tim in front on the sidewalk. Hockey equipment in Canada is the $400 million a year market. Canadian Tire Corporation is the world's biggest retailer of hockey equipment. Yes, I said world's. With Walmart moving in to try and steal some of the market, Canadian Tire signed a deal with the National Hockey League to help keep their lead. This deal meant that Canadian Tire is the Hockey League's official partner and can use NHL logos and marks. Canadian Tire launched a website to teach people about hockey, and its official spokesperson is Jonathan Toews, NHL player and 3-time Stanley Cup champion. One of Canadian Tire's slogans is, "We all play for Canada." More than 15,000 players have tried to win world's gold in hockey since 1930. More than 9,000 players have tried to win the Stanley Cup since 1893. More than 4,000 players have tried to win Olympic gold in ice hockey since 1920. But only 26 players have won all three and have been accepted into the Triple Gold Club. The four nations represented by the winners are Canada, Sweden, Russia, and the Czech Republic. The Czech Republic have 2 winners. Russia has 6 winners. Canada and Sweden are tied with 9 winners each. From left to right are Canada's winners: Rob Blake, Joe Sakic, Brendan Shanahan, Scott Niedermayer, Chris Pronger, Eric Stahl, Jonathan Toews, Patrice Bergeron, and Sidney Crosby. What puts Canada ahead in this club is that there is only one Triple Gold Club coach. That is Canadian Mike Babcock. Ice hockey rinks show how hockey is a big part of our culture. In the 2014-2015 season, Canada had 2,631 indoor and 5,000 outdoor ice hockey rinks. In second place, Russia only had 450 indoor rinks and half as many outdoor rinks. This statistic doesn't even count the many games of hockey played in Canada on ponds or lakes where rinks are made from snow being shoveled off. Hockey is a big part of Canada's culture. It is the number 1 team sport in Canada with 1.3 million participants. Even the University of Saskatchewan offers a course, Hockey and Canadian Literature. We even give a picture of a hockey game being played on our old $5 bills. Speaking of money, with only 7 Canadian teams, the NHL makes a third of their profit here in Canada. Hockey is so important to Canada that even former prime ministers take part in the games. At every Ottawa Senators game, prime ministers from the past are brought to life to race around the rink. In closing, I'd like to show you a clip of this. I'll put my final link in the chat box. Thanks for watching.